Marquita. I'm the nutritionist here at the Center for New Medicine, and today we're going to be talking about a very hot topic. I'm sure you've heard the word keto. It's a buzz right now, and everybody's really jumping on the bandwagon. But we're going to find that it's actually something that isn't actually a fad or something that is new. Now, I'm going to talk about it from A to Z today, why I think it's a great program for many populations, but also too how we have to cycle in and out of it so that we can create a lifestyle out of this. So as I said before, this isn't something that's new. The keto program has been in use really since the 1930s, and they utilized it as a treatment for seizures with children. Now, Dr. Simeon's used the same protocol, but he used it in a different way, where instead of really so much focusing on lowering the carbohydrate count, he lowered the caloric count and really had a 500-calorie diet. But of course, the nice thing about it is that you moved into his facility and he took care of you, and that's all that you did was show up and kind of had your meals and so forth. But we're trying to create a lifestyle out of this. And so again, when we think about clean keto, we want to think about things that are not going to cause inflammation. And inflammation is the #1 cause of all disease. And so hopefully you'll walk away with a really good idea on why you would want to adopt some aspect of this protocol as being part of the things that are into your diet. Now, the problem with diets is they go in and out of fashion. But since the 1930s, we say, well, this one didn't go in and out of fashion, but it was utilized for different things. Now, when Dr. Simeon started utilizing it, he really kind of utilized it more for young men whose gonads hadn't really dropped. And he noticed that all of these children were starting to lose a lot of weight. And then so he opened up his clinic and he used what's called HCG, which was a hormone, not a sex hormone, but to utilize the hypothalamus into burning fat for fuels. But we don't need an injection. All we need to do is really get our body to be a fat-burning machine. Now, a lot of diets can be very stressful because, one, you're changing the way you eat. Socially, it's a lot harder for you to choose things. And at the same time, you get really confused on how do I cook this way? How do I adopt it into a lifestyle? So we want to take the stress out of it for you guys tonight and really just show you how easy it is so that you don't have to get onto the mindset of this being a yo-yo, but something that you can adopt into your life on a day-to-day basis. Now, what I've done is I've tried to make it really easy and created what we call a keto stacking program. Now, being in ketosis means that one of two things. I either have very, very low calories, so my body's looking for another source of fuel, or I have very, very low foods that turn into glucose, and so my body has to look for a secondary fuel, which is going to be fats. Now, fats are very dynamic in their nature, where carbohydrates will hold, let's just say, 40 calories, but a fat will hold 140. So again, you get a lot more combustion out of utilizing fat for fuel. Now, many people have actually become resistant to burning fat for fuel because they have become insulin resistant. Now, the thing with a pre-diabetic issue, not only have you become insulin resistant in regards of allowing your body to transport the calories across the cell wall to use for energy, but on the other side, remember, you've got a yin and yang to every bodily function. And so when I become insulin resistant, I also become fat resistant as well. And so you see a lot of people with pre-diabetic issues with a big belly, and oftentimes even when they are very thin, they still have their belly, and we call that the pre-diabetic or cortisol belly. Now, again, when my body doesn't get enough fuel and it doesn't have capacity to use fat for fuel, what is it going to do? It's going to tell you to eat a whole lot more, but it's going to want to use those calories that are easy to access, which is sugar, or things that turn into sugar. And so what we want to discover today are there what we call superior sugars and inferior sugars, not good or bad, but just ones that are going to allow us to be a fat burner, and ones that maybe hold us to where we are at or keep continuing to store fat for fuel. So I built this protocol on a step-by-step program, and so it's really nice because it takes a lot of guesswork out of it for everybody, and what are the best foods, what kind of exercise should we do so that we hold on to lean muscle tissue, because if you're not an easy fat burner, what is the first fuel your body's going to utilize? It's going to be your muscle. And we see this a lot with our patients in the healing center that have compromised immune systems, is that they're already under stress in terms of their internal body organs dealing with their diagnosis and the emotions behind it, which is very catabolic in nature, meaning breaks down lean muscle tissue anyway. And then a lot of times we recognize that these patients are compromised because their ability to use sugars are not going to be good because they're pre-diabetic. And this is, we know that cancer fuels off of glucose. So again, what we're really trying to do is two things when we work with cancer patients is not starve the cancer by starving the patient. So we want to hold on to lean muscle tissue. So it's really, really important that you understand that the diet alone is not going to give you the resilience and to maintain your muscle mass and the fuel that you're going to need. You're going to need to do some exercise. So we really kind of built in this keto stacking mindset. What is the right kind of exercise for any population, whether you have a compromised immune system or whether you're capable of, HIIT training, high intensity training. So we've got a little bit of something for everybody. It's really important to also understand that stress is the number one cause of all disease and all inflammation. It is the one thing that lowers natural killer cells faster than anything, along with really bad sleep. Now, a lot of time when people have a lot of anxiety, they can't turn their mind off, they're overthinking and overprocessing, so they don't really get quality sleep. And so again, this will be a reflection of your natural killer cells. So it's always good if you kind of want to know if your body's defense and how it is to have a test. And we have them here at the Center for New Medicine that can actually see what your ratio of natural killer cells are, which is really very important if you want to heal and also if we want to prevent disease as well. So built into the keto stacking course is lots of different information on how we can reduce your stress level, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through positive reframing, which is a critical voice in our head. I always tell patients, if you're feeling yucky, whether it's sad or mad or angry or resentful, you have to ask yourself, you're listening to a story in your head. What is that story that you're listening to? And one, how valid is it? Is it valid enough for me to get to change my situation, which might be a catalyst? Or is it a situation where it kind of keeps me trapped and locked into being a victim, which will never get you into a state of wellness? So in the keto stacking course, we've provided lots of material so that you can really begin to inner evaluate yourself and say, gosh, I love myself enough to feel good emotionally all the time. My emotional well-being dictates my biochemistry of my body. And so when we realize that the brain and the GI system, your whole digestion, your ability to eliminate is all based upon calmness, because when we're having a lot of stress, what does it do? It tightens up, and then we end up with more constipation issues. And so we really want to understand that it's not one thing, it's going to be a variety of things that are going to give you the lifestyle that we're looking for. Cellular intelligence is really important, because if I have a choice to be a victim mind state, or I have a choice to just be in gratitude and recognize that there's a pearl of wisdom to all my suffering, how did I become a better person? How did I become an advocate for the things that worked for me in my life? How can I share that and pass it on? Then we don't need to repeat this journey over and over again, because we've got the lesson the first time, which is so very important for reoccurring issues that happen again, whether it's reoccurring weight gain or it's reoccurring with the disease factor. We really want to change the dynamics on how we speak to our cells so that they can speak to our chemistry. And then, of course, maintaining success, meaning, do I need to be on such a rigidity of the way I eat? And once you really get to where you want to go, you can create flexibility. And we call those refeeds, where we have maybe a pretty stringent protocol from Monday through Thursday, and on Friday through Saturday, we're a little bit more liberal. We eat more carbohydrates. We allow ourselves to engage in social activity where we want to have a cocktail, or we want to have something that is a little bit more carbohydrate. We're able to do that. Now, our body is going to create a water retention from this, because when you have lowered all of your, what we would call water absorbent foods like breads and pastas and cookies and cakes, those things, as you notice, when you cook them, they might start out small, but they end up expanding in the body. And so those are water absorbent foods. So when you go on a ketosis or a keto adaptive diet, you're going to find during the first week you're urinating a lot, and that's because your body is dumping all the waterlogged tissue that you've been holding onto from having these water absorbent foods. So of course, if you have a weekend where you're indulging a little bit more, don't be surprised that when you get on the scale that you're about 2 to 3 pounds heavier than you were before Friday. Now, once you get to where your goal is, who cares, 2 to 3 pound swing? Because we can say, I'm okay, I can still fit into my jeans, I still feel, I don't feel bloaty, and I don't feel like I'm really holding on to real water retention, and then we've got a nice little swing weight, so then we can be a little bit more flexible, inviting other foods back into our diet that we might have taken out. So it's not a rigid of, oh my gosh, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. But we also want to say you want to be doing for the rest of your life the things that like you, because then I'll go back to having more inflammation. If I eat, let's just say, French fries, I'm going to go into complete inflammatory process in my body. My brain's going to be very happy. It's going to be like cocaine. It is really, it's sensational in my brain. It's meeting everything I would possibly want, soft and crunchy and salty, of course, but at what cost? And so again, you begin to do these things less and less. And once in a while you do it, you say, well, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to get a little bloaty. I'm going to get a little gassy. But, we make those choices consciously in regards that we know what's going to happen. So it's no surprise to us, so that we can manage our weight between that, 1 to 2 to 3 pounds, not 1 to 10 to 1 to 12 pounds. All of a sudden we're going, oh my gosh, how did I get here? And it's because we weren't paying attention to how our body is responding. So we do create a whole area of how do you maintain the results you get, how do you make this a lifestyle, how do you have what we would consider cheat days, we call them refeeds, but at the same time, being really conscious about it. I'm not going to go have a pizza with gluten. I'm going to have a gluten-free pizza. All right. So again, I'm still going to have some cheese, which would be considered okay on a keto mindset. But if you were dealing with immunity issues or autoimmunity issues, many people have dairy sensitivity, so it causes an inflammatory response. I'll get mucus and have all the sensation. I'll say, was it really worth it? Well, it might have been at the moment, but then it's really at the end of the day not. But again, I allow myself that flexibility so that I don't get into a mindset of deprivation, which is going to overall cause you more stress than anything. Now, so why would dieting alone lead to weight gain? And honestly, because we don't do it correctly. Now, you've got different mechanisms in your body that are always trying to ensure that you have enough stored fat for fuel. And so your body wants to have a certain amount 4 times when you are ill that it could feed off of that. And so you have a hormone called ghrelin that tells the body, I'm hungry, it's time to eat, and you've got the leptin receptor side that says, hey, you've got enough stored in your fat banks, eat off that fat. And so it's really important that we stabilize people's blood sugar and not do crash diets, so that we can have consistency, so that your body can really depend on you and you don't have the stress of going up and down, because that can create a lot of stress internally, even emotionally. If I'm really, watching you eat that food and I'm really wanting it really bad, I can create more stress hormones that are going to have me hold on to weight gain than I would if I just said, I'm just going to have 2 polite bites. Now, do I need to eat the whole thing? No, but maybe 1 bite or 2 just to kind of, give me some emotional satiety at the moment. I might a couple of minutes later find, oh, why did I do that? But at the same time, I'm allowing myself the flexibility. So we don't want to get on the rigid mindset that it's so strict that we can't, continue to do what I call ritual eating. Invite people over, have social time, but with things that really, at the end of the day, like us and not create big problems. So we want to get the stressors out. We want to make sure that you're not eating a bunch of food that are allergenic to your nature, because that in and of itself is going to cause your cortisol levels to rise, and cortisol is a storage hormone. And so remember, insulin cortisol is an action hormone, but it also can store fat onto the belly. So insulin is a hormone that when you eat protein or you eat carbohydrate, it is produced as a vehicle to transport those calories into the cell wall. Now, if I'm under stress, my body's produced a flight and fright response, which is called cortisol. Now, cortisol is action hormone. And so, for example, when I have an action hormone, what do? I shut off my digestive system, because I don't want the energy in the digestive process. I want it in my arms and feet so I can run. So with high stress, what happens? It thwarts our digestion. Now, cortisol, if it's not utilized to go run, flee, or fight, it's an agitator. And what it does, it can literally neutralize insulin. So for people who have very high stress lifestyles, which is most of us, if we don't really do something to download that stress on a day-to-day basis, we can end up with very much a cortisol belly. And unfortunately, the weight around your belly produces bad estrogens for women and men. I mean, men are not exempt from having breast cancer, and we're seeing it more and more all the time. And so again, it's really important to remember that the weight around the girth is going to be more detrimental than any weight anywhere else in the body. And so our intention is reduce the stress by education, reduce the stress by knowing the foods that potentially are your allergens, and then also activities that help to move and utilize this cortisol so that it does not get stored. Now, if dieting doesn't work, what should we do instead? We should really learn how to use our primal blueprint. When we were a caveman, we hunted, we gorged because there was no refrigerations. We ate what we could because we knew that maybe tomorrow or the next day we might not be able to source out food. So our body's used to taking its excess and storing it in fat cells to be utilized at a different time. But unfortunately, we don't live in that day and age. We have access 24/7. You can order something on Amazon and it's there in a couple hours. I mean, pretty soon we're going to have little drones flying in our food. So we have the accessibility now, which has created a false way of living and now has changed us really into not being fat burners, but fat storers. And so again, we want to really understand how do we manage the food and the stress and create a program that is going to be supportive. So let's kind of break it down. Now, everybody knows, if you guys have been reading any of the magazines or a lot of the publicity about keto, that it's a very high-fat diet. Now, don't make the mistake that it's all fat that we think that you can have. Now, fat can be oxidized and can be very inflammatory to the body. If you have too much nuts and seeds and vegetable oils, you can have too much omega-6 in the body and create arachidonic acid, which creates an inflammatory response in the body as well. So everything has to be in balance. Now, one of the things that we say about fats, we don't have saturated fats, we don't have what we call hydrogenated fats, and we certainly don't have fried foods, because if you take a French fry, which is basically a very high starchy food, and you fry it with very high heat, then it creates acrylamides, and acrylamides are carcinogenic in nature, just like the amines of a charred meat are in regards to when we cook things at very high heats. So again, all fat is not going to be good fat. Your nuts and seeds and avocados, and we're going to be talking about that thoroughly in the next slide. And so when we break it down, we say to ourselves that yes, the majority of the calories, because there's 4 units of energy to a carbohydrate and protein, and 9 into a fat. So we get more bang for our buck with good, healthy fats. Now, the one beautiful thing about fat is fat doesn't turn into sugar. So if you happen to have a little bit more fat in your diet that even is allotted when we do your calculations based upon your basal metabolic rate, then it's not going to create a big problem, especially if you are a patient that has immunity issues, cancer. One of the things we're trying to do is keep their weight on. And so having a little higher fat, good quality fat is really what we're looking for, and we want to protect our oil. So a lot of times I tell patients, be respectful of your oil. When you're cooking, use things more like sprays or broths to cook with, and then when the food comes off the heat, that's when I would be more generous with my oils, whether it's on top of some broccoli or some grass-fed butter, or I'm going to put a little bit of sesame oil in my Asian food. So I really respect my fats, because again, your fats are what are so important to your hormones. And on every single cell in the body, there's a lipid layer, so we need really good healthy fats and not excessive oxidation of those fats, because then we end up using all our wonderful antioxidants that are so important for treating disease and for anti-aging. So breaking it down 101. So again, Now, we don't want to think in good and bad. We want to think in superior and inferior, because if we start to think in good and bad, when you do bad things, you need punishment, and punishment is to increase whatever problem you have. I don't care what it is, okay? If it's sometimes when our patients eat something, they say, oh, I felt so bad, I'm so guilty. And I said, oh my gosh, that's an emotion that's going to flood your body with instant inflammation, and whatever you were trying to avoid, you will pull right to you out of guilt. So we don't want to have that. So again, if you have a French fry once in a while, it's not going to make or break you, but at the same time, we want to be eating quality fats. So again, the good fats are going to be your salmon, the eggs. We don't have any issues with eggs. If you have cancer, of course, then we want to reduce the amount that you take, because it does have an amino acid that can support cancerous growth. So a lot of times with cancer patients, I say very minimal amount of eggs, and maybe utilize those eggs to make things that are more robust, like your keto buns, where I have to use 3 egg whites, or a keto pizza crust made out of almond flour, that are fun foods that are really going to allow me to really feel that I am still being able to eat all the things I like without really sacrificing. But again, I'm not eating eggs for breakfast every day, because that will also create an allergenic response in anybody, regardless whether they have an immunity issue or not. So a lot of times what I like to do is I like to do intermittent fasting. And so I use a bulletproof coffee. I don't do good with caffeine, so I use one with decaf, or I use a matcha tea. And that really is really nice, because what it does is allows me to source fat out for fuel for a longer period of time. Because the one thing that's great about fat, it doesn't need insulin to be utilized. So if I have fats in between my meals, or I eat it before I eat protein and carbohydrates, and can go with those calories for a longer period of time, I stay in fat burning modality for a greater number of hours. And really, as far as anti-aging concern, I probably do it 5 to 6 days a week. I'm 62 years old, and I say, why not? If this is a way that I can, get my body to catabolize fats. And sometimes I like to do just a single fasting day, so that I could catabolize what we would consider dead cells in the body. Why wouldn't I do that to help my body support itself so that it can have a better chance in anti-aging and defeating any kind of disease? So the good fats are really important, so we don't drench everything with a ton of butter, tons of oil. And again, we really are careful about the oils we have: the avocado oil, the avocados, the olive oil, the macadamia nut oil, and butters, and good coconut oil. Those are all fantastic. And then, of course, your olives and your avocados and your nuts and your seeds and your hemp seeds. So again, we want to not say that this is a heyday of freeness that we can have, because again, then you're going to get lean too much on the omega-6 side, and then we can create a little inflammation. So about 2 tablespoons of good healthy oils every time you sit down to eat a meal should be approximately about average. Now, when it comes to the myths about fat, that fat makes you fat, we know that the preferred fuel is sugar. That fat is really hard to get to. The body has to use more energy to do that. So in reality, when we all went on what we would call a fat-free diet, the obesity rate went up, right? And so why? They took the fat out, and they added fake sugars in there, and they added franken-fats in there, which our body had no idea what to do with these foods. But between the chemicals and the franken-fats and the different aspartame, NutraSweet, all these things, it really turned our metabolism upside down. And when our body doesn't know what to do with it, what's it going to do? It's going to try to store it and put it in a fat cell for the liver to dispose of it at another time. So we really want to be conscious of recognizing that fat is our friend. In fact, 80% of our brain is made up of good, healthy fats. All of our hormones are made up of these really wonderful fats. In fact, our body produces 80% of the cholesterol we have. Now, some people will say, well, doesn't a ketogenic diet increase your cholesterol levels? Now, we do watch that, because some people have what's called a mutated gene called MTHRF gene, and it's the body's ability to basically detox. Now, the liver is responsible for phase 2 detoxification. So if this should occur, sometimes people's cholesterol levels do go up a bit, or the LDL levels, and we would want to take that into consideration in regards of potentially giving them a folic acid that's methylated and broken down so the body can detox better, but maybe their gallbladder's not functioning as well as it should. And so it's not doing a good job of breaking down its fats, and they end up in the blood, and all of a sudden now LDL levels go up a bit too. So we're looking at gallbladder issues, and we're looking at liver issues usually when we have that happen. But I would say 85–90% of the time you're not going to see an increase of cholesterol issues that people get a little bit panicky about. Now, of course, do you have to eat meat to be on this diet? You do not have to eat meat. But of course, meat is what we would consider has all the amino acids that satisfy the brain in regards to the essentials. Now, one thing about meat, it's very satisfying. Now, most people don't overindulge in meat. They overindulge in carbohydrates and sweets and things like that because it's very much a heroin mindset of the brain. But usually our brain is very conscious about balance. And so it's kind of like a full tank of gas. If I got a third of the tank of the gas of my protein, I got a third of the tank of gas of my fat, it's already telling my brain, giving me a signal, hey, slow down, stop eating, you're going to start spilling the gas out. And so protein is wonderful for that mindset because it really tells the brain, you know what, you're part of the satisfaction of what you need essentially has been met. Then the other essential thing is fats. And so fat is essential as well. So those two things immediately start to balance out your cravings. So what we see on this keto adaptive diet is people after a week, they don't have any cravings anymore. This is the things they report to me all the time. They might say, oh my gosh, I'm really addicted to breads and pastas and things like that. I said, just be your own personal experiment. Just give yourself 10 days and let's not have them in your diet and let's see how you crave those foods. And they always come back reporting, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I don't have any cravings. Gosh, I could pass the bread by and I don't even feel hungry anymore. Why? Because they're adapting to actually using their stored fat for fuel. How beautiful is that? Look at how God has made us. He made us in response that it should be able to take care of itself. But again, when they're overloaded, what does it do? It says, I can't even hear the signals anymore, and all the wires are crossed. So again, we always say pasture-raised meats, organic, would be fantastic. And I tell patients if they're only capable of buying farm-raised, I'd rather see you be a vegetarian, honestly, because you're going to get the hormones, you're going to get the antibiotics, you're going to get, inhumane, treating of these animals that are full of high cortisol, epinephrine. So in all reality, I say it's really important for you to say, what is the quality of what I'm bringing into my body? If I want that food to turn into energy, what kind of energy am I sourcing it from? So wild caught fish, the smaller the better. We don't do tuna. We don't do shark because of the higher level of mercury. And then, of course, with Fukushima and the radiation and things of that nature, we want to be really cognizant. And at the same time, if you know that you have, most of all our patients do get tested for heavy metals because that can be causal effect of a lot of problems as well. If you have a high mercury count, then you really kind of want to not have any kind of fish in your diet until we get the mercury count down, which is very important. And so again, we're not trying to limit you, but we want to say, let's make this work. Let's eat what your body can handle, can break down, and utilize, and then get rid of what it can't so we don't continue to have more storage. So again, good healthy meats, if they have a little fat on them, we're perfectly fine. We'll satiate the brain a little bit better. But I think wilder the better. So bison, buffalo, antelope, red meat, as far as beef. And then it goes, Cornish game hen, turkey, chicken, all right? So again, the wilder you can go, the better when it comes. And you don't need a whole lot. In the keto mindset, if you eat more protein than your body can actually utilize, then what does it do? It sends it straight to the liver, it converts it into a process called glycation, and then it turns that into fuel and gets stored in the muscle fiber as sugar. So even like on what we would consider a paleo diet, where you can pretty much have as much protein as you want, it can convert into glucose. And so again, if we're in a compromised situation where we are pre-diabetic or diabetic or have cancer or weight gain, we don't want to have an abundant amount of protein. We probably want to have about 20% protein of our total calories throughout the day in protein, which really comes out to pretty much no more than the palm of your hand and also the thickness of your hand. So it's not as much as you want to eat. And honestly, really, as you get older, we do need protein for our muscle because we're muscle wasting because we don't have the testosterone. But again, we're not growing, so we don't need a ton. We just need, a small breast of, whatever we're eating, chop it up and throw it into a salad so you've got a bite with everything you're eating, and it just makes it a lot nicer in terms of satisfaction. Now, When it comes to carbohydrates, we want to say there is superior and there is inferior as well. Now, a superior food, two characteristics it'll have, and I like to use sensory because I think people remember things if you kind of put them into cartoon fashion, is if I put something in my mouth and it is not sweet, it's identically not sweet, it's more bitter. Like your cruciferous vegetables and your salads and your cucumbers and your asparagus and your artichokes. When you put those in your mouth, they're not sweet at all, right? So those are considered foods that are going to be superior to what we would consider a keto adaptive diet, okay? And so honestly, I want to have somewhat about, let's just say 75% of your plate filled with those foods, both raw and also cooked, because sometimes we need to break the cell wall of these foods to make it digestible, especially for those people who have gut issues and they have a lot of issues with fiber, and so then we oftentimes need to have more cooked foods if they've got a lot of irritable bowel syndrome or gut issues. So we take that into consideration. Now, of course, we realize that some foods like yams and fruits and things that we would think are absolutely amazing, they are, but they have their place, and they go into, the fruits can still be a little bit, think better fruits like your berries, and if you're going to eat like an apple or pear or peach, only half, because a whole fruit is 18 grams of sugar. Well, most people, when they are on a keto adaptive diet, the maximum amount of carbohydrates that they get at a meal for a woman is going to be anywhere between 12 and 16 carbohydrates. So it really doesn't fit in for a sense of being full and satiated. But now if I have a patient that comes in and has already lost a tremendous amount of muscle and a tremendous amount of weight, I may add a little bit of yam into their diet just so that they can have it kind of as a condiment in regards of color to hold on to a little bit of weight. Now, things that are high sugar, we said things that were low, they are bitter to the palate. So things that are high sugar can be sweet to the palate. Things that are low sugar shrink when I cook them. If I had a whole tray of broccoli and cauliflower and asparagus and I put a little oil and put it in the oven, I would pull a tray out that would be half a tray. Why? Because it excreted liquid. Our body is really looking for that 30% of hydration coming from the foods that we eat. So we don't want a lot of food that doesn't release water. Now think of things that shrink will shrink our problem. Now for those of you who really want weight loss, if you have a shrinking food, it's going to shrink your belly. When we cook meat, it shrinks. When we cook spinach, it shrinks, and mushrooms and things of that nature. So again, we want to think to ourselves really logically, bitter, better, shrinking foods, okay? So then we say, well, what would be the opposite of that? Well, we've already discovered one characteristic is sweet. But then we also say, now, if a food is sweet, it's going to be higher sugar than, of course, a broccoli. But if a food expands when I cook it, it's going to be the most amount of sugar. So if I put grain, and I don't care if it's a gluten-free quinoa or millet or what have you, brown rice, white rice, it doesn't matter. If I put it in water, what does it do? It triples its size and it holds in all the water, okay? So that's an expansive food. So on the keto adaptive diet, we don't have grains in the diet. But we do have replacements absolutely for everything, because I'm a firm believer, if you take out something, you got to put something in its place, or that very thing you took out will somehow find its way back to your plate. So people like rice, we do cauliflower rice. And so if you guys have ever seen any of my YouTube cooking videos, we have cauliflower risotto and cauliflower macaroni and cheese and cauliflower Spanish rice and cauliflower potato salad and cauliflower mashed potatoes. So our brain really is just looking for the sensation, the texture, the look of it. It's not really, so much on the carbohydrate factor unless, we're super unbalanced. But when we start to get to that level, we are very satisfied. It feels the same, it looks the same, it almost tastes the same. So we're really not going to be deficient of absolutely anything that we desire as emotional food for us in our diet. We're just switching it out with something that's going to be of better nature. Now again, things that get bigger are breads. And so unfortunately, everybody loves bread. I mean, I love bread, Sometimes I just take a loaf and just smell it, and, San Francisco, piping hot French bread, right? But the bottom line is, unfortunately, we live in an age where the grains are not cared for in regards of the way they harvest and end up with glyphosate, which is coming from Roundup, which creates inflammation to all digestive systems. So it's not that all of a sudden we've got this, craze of Crohn's and IBS. It's because of the chemicals that are putting on these foods that are creating, a huge upset in the GI system. So again, if we have a compromised immune system, regardless whether we have cancer or we have autoimmune issue or we want to lose weight, we've got to get those foods that are inflating and inflammatory out of the diet. Now, when we go into maintenance phase, do we bring some of them back in? We do, but we go gluten-free all the time. Now, we want breads on this type of a diet, so we say, okay, well, what can we have in its place? Well, we can have coconut flour, we can have almond flour, we can have garbanzo bean flour, and right now we're really living at a time where, my goodness, you can go to pretty much any store now. The siete tortillas, they're about 10 carbohydrates, but they're really tasty and nice. And so for 10 carbohydrates, and I could have, I could turn it into a sandwich or a quesadilla. I feel very satisfied that I'm not missing something that I can pick up with my hand. The keto buns I make literally are 5 carbohydrates for a full bun. A normal hamburger bun is 45 grams of sugar. That's a lot. And then you have a bag of French fries, another 45 grams of sugar, and then maybe you throw in a Diet Coke or you throw in a shake. You're literally creating an inflammatory cascade like you can't ever imagine what happened to you, and your body can't handle it. So what do you feel when you eat that? You feel very sleepy because your brain is being intoxicated by an overload of sugar. It starts to shut down. Now, I don't know about you, but I want food to be a fuel. I want it to be energy. I want it to give me vitality. I don't want it to have to feel like I have to go to sleep after I've eaten a meal. That's not what fuel is to me. And so we really have to distinguish between what we would consider superior and inferior. And so the grains we take out of the regime, and then I tell people who are vegetarians, if you're not going to eat meat, then we will keep beans into the diet, but no, because they come from the plant kingdom, they still are going to be a higher sugar than, let's just say, a piece of fish. And so again, they do have a lot of fiber in it. Now, when they swell up, they don't absorb all the water like a rice does. Why? Because they've got a lot of fiber in them, which means that they're going to go very slowly into the bloodstream. So again, I always pair a bean up with a very low sugar food. Like I make a great lentil burger, but it's half cauliflower mashed up and half, lentils and, different little vegetables, and it's beautiful and it's very satisfying. So for vegetarians, there's no reason that you can't be on this particular regime, but you have to be careful not to pair up a high sugar food with another high sugar food. Like I would not put, let's just say, beans with a salad that had carrots and beets in it, because those are two sweet foods, right? Sweet food and food that expands are high sugar. You don't want to put two on your plate at the same time because you will imbalance the scale very, very quickly, very fast. So even when we're using a little bit of yam for someone who's lost a lot of weight, we don't do a whole yam. We do maybe a quarter of a yam, and I have them steam it so they're not overheating it, take a couple of rounds, and then throw it into the salad. So again, depending on what your particular needs are, but for all purposes, when you're on a more of a low carbohydrate diet and you're looking good for weight loss, then we want to keep all potatoes out, even yam as well, okay? Now, another thing that people don't get is these foods really are sugar. And so again, a piece of bread is going to be somewhere around 18 grams of sugar. So if I have 2 pieces of that, I'm having 36 grams of sugar. Well, that's probably 2/3 of what a woman is supposed to have on a keto adaptive diet. Now, when I say keto adaptive, it's because we're not doing the typical keto diet, which is only 10% of your total calories in carbohydrates of all sources. Now, that equates to anywhere between 20 and 30 carbohydrates a day. Now, if 1 carrot is 9 carbs, and let's just say half an apple is 9 carbs, it's really not food that we can be to sustain our sense of satiety, our sense of emotion for any great length of period of time. So we only really have you go into ketosis cyclically. That's why I like intermittent fasting, because then we can go for a longer period of time. So we're in a fat burning modality before we eat our lunch meal. And again, when you get to my age, we don't need to eat that much. So again, skipping breakfast. If you're a child, obviously you're not going to be on mostly a diet, but like if you're a teenager, a lot of times they're growing. They have different needs metabolically. They really kind of need to eat every 4 to 5 hours, and so most people wake up hungry, and it's because they've used a lot of the glucose that was stored in their body, saying, now come on, let's refuel. But if we don't refuel, what are we going to do? We're going to use our fat for fuel, and so I like doing that a lot. So again, fuel sources that, when people think of those, they don't think of sugar. Like when I tell them, oh my gosh, I take some little sugar cubes out and I go, okay, well here's your piece of bread, here's your French fries. I go, well if I put water in this, would you drink it? They go, no. I mean, if I say it to a kid, they say yes, right? Put a little color into it. But most adults will say, oh no, I wouldn't even think about that. And so we really have to look at these foods as foods that turn into a lot of glucose. And I'm not saying that glucose is bad. It's really important to fuel the brain, to the muscles and stuff. But again, we overdo it as a society. Something like 150 pounds of sugar a year of the foods that we eat and turn into. So again, a lot of people think honey is also really super healthy. Well, it is Manuka honey. It's very healing to the gut. But again, it represents 17 carbohydrates of my 17 I could eat at a meal. So do I want to have like a small breasted chicken and a tablespoon of honey and a little avocado on my plate? Probably not. So I switched people over to stevia, to lakanto, which is a monk fruit, or agave 5, which has only 1 carbohydrate in it, swerve. So those are all acceptable sweeteners that we can have that still, satiate that sweet in our brain of what we're looking for, but are going to create some impact. And when it comes to tropical fruit, we just don't have them in the diet, because 27 grams to a banana is almost 2/3 of what we can have in a day. So again, think fruits no more than once a day, and think better fruit, which is going to be your berries. So maybe if you're doing a plant-based shake in the morning, or you're doing a shake of some sort, you throw a little handful of berries in there, but that's it. We don't get to be indulging and eating them throughout the day as a snack, because we want to be able to access our fat for fuel. And so again, we limit the types of fruit and the amount of fruit on a keto adaptive diet. And so kind of just think of your body as, it's a car, it's a vehicle. It transports our soul around, right? And so we have to say to ourselves, if I want to keep this vehicle in tip-top shape, I got to take care of it, right? If it's like my prized possession, if I don't, then it's going to be putting along, and then we end up not only with inflammatory issues, but osteoporotic issues. We gray sooner, we age sooner. And so I don't know about anybody out there, but I'm all about trying to slow that process down as much as possible and keep my brain as alert as possible, because face it, dementia and also Alzheimer's is what we would consider type 3 diabetes. And so for people who have type 2 diabetes, and their hemoglobin A1C, which is how much sugar's been in your blood over a 3-month period, is in the 7s and 8s and 9s, you're pretty much headed towards dementia. And so again, to have a doctor say that to you, maybe would be more sobering than just handing you metformin and saying, okay, just take this pill. You say, okay, this is going to lead you here, and this is going to lead you towards dementia and heart disease. Then we might take a more serious approach and really how we really want to look at our lifestyle and the things that we put in our body, because we want good, clean gas to get us where we want to go at the end of the day. We really have to avoid the inequitable food, okay? The processed food, the hydrogenated, the saturated, the chemicals, the irradiated foods, the GMO foods, the glyphosate foods. All of these are poisons and toxins that your body has absolutely no idea what to do with this. We live in a day in a society where we don't have choice anymore when it comes to this overload of toxins, whether it's in the air or the metals in the water and all the medications in our drinking waters and taking a bath with it. We don't have choice anymore. So the choice that we do have is to purchase those things that we consciously know don't have these in them, where if we're eating them or we're putting them on our skin or on our hair, we really have to say to ourselves, these are actually going to create healthy cells or actually going to deprive my cells of life. And if we thought about that, it could be a little bit more expensive, but it doesn't have to be. You can go to farmers markets, you can use things like different oils on your skin, and you don't have to have these super expensive things, but things without chemicals is really, really important. And so when we talk about cheat days, there's 2 things I like to keep in mind. One, I don't want to upset the biochemistry of my body, meaning eat foods that don't like me, that can compromise my immune system. I have Hashimoto's, but it's totally under control. All my tithers are down. But the reason it's down is because I'm very strict about not adding an ounce of gluten in my diet. Now, when I go out to dinner, I cannot guarantee someone's not going to have, I don't have celiac, right? But again, any kind of gluten is going to create my immune system, and especially to the thyroid, create more breaking down of the thyroid. So it's a hyperimmunity issue. So for me, I say to myself, if I eat gluten, this could break down my thyroid. Do I really want that? No. So for me, it's more sobering in my choice to say, no, I don't really want that, because I know at the end of the day, I want to keep my thyroid as healthy as possible. So when I do cheat days, I might do a pizza, but it's an almond crust pizza, but it might have real cheese on it, because in a keto adaptive diet, if you don't have any cancer or any allergy to it, you can have goat cheese and feta cheese, and I lean towards the healthier cheeses, and I tell patients a lot of people are allergic to cow dairy, so pay attention to any kind of mucus that you might get when you eat these foods, because honestly, if you're eating a food that your body doesn't like, it's going to end up not being able to break it down and storing it in a fat cell. So for me, a big cheat day would be some rice on my plate, or I go to sushi, or I have an almond crust pizza with real cheese on it. I'm totally satisfied. Do I do this once in a while? Absolutely. But do 90% of the time, 85% of the time, I'm really kind of firmly, onto this more keto adaptive lifestyle, that it keeps me healthy, it keeps me out of inflammation, it keeps me with good mental facility, and really at the weight that I want to be, not what my body wants to be for extra famine food in case it needs it, okay? Our body always wants to have a little cheat on that. So the biggest drawbacks with cheat days is that it's like heroin, all right? So when we go on to this keto adaptive diet, I say, okay, you guys are going to go into sugar rehab. And when we go into rehab, we, for the first, week, we're really kind of jonesing out. We're missing the sensation, the crunch, the this, the that of things, and until all of a sudden we start to get balanced. Now, I'm not saying that cravings aren't normal, because if I were to see you to eat a chocolate mousse, I'd be going, oh my gosh, that looks so good, I want some, right? I would crave because I have sight seeing. But for me to just sit here and be thinking about bagels and chips and popcorn and pretzels, that's totally unnatural. It's because I have an imbalance in my brain in terms of its glucose level. And so the problem with cheat days, it puts that little, if I were going into sugar rehab or heroin rehab, right, which is really the same stimulation to the brain, it lights it up like a, completely like a firework, then again, as soon as I have it, then it's like, oh, my body remembers, oh, that's so lovely and so enjoyable. Isn't there some left in the kitchen? I know that there's a little cookies left from yesterday, and then all of a sudden now you get this reel in your head is I'm thinking about that food, and I want to eat that food, and there's still some left. So again, what it does, it can set you up to have more cravings until you really become fat adapted and utilizing fat for fuel. But again, you might have 1 or 2 days, and after that you're going, I'm done, because why? You don't like the way it makes you feel. And that's why every Monday I always start off my weeks with intermittent fasting. I get right back on the bandwagon until I get to what I would call my original weight before the weekend. I stay doing that. And in that way I can hold on to a really healthy mindset. Now, we're looking at sugar. I said 150, but this is at 180 pounds of sugar. And so again, we have not adapted to this age of eating. And sugar, not only does it feed cancer, but it feeds candida and all opportunistic organisms. And so people who have diabetic issues, 99% of the time are going to have a fungal issue. Now, there's no such thing as getting rid of all of the fungus in the body, because you have what's called an ecosystem, that we're all supposed to be living in balance and harmony with each other. But if you have more fungal than you have healthy bacteria, then we have an overload principle, and you can end up with what's called systemic candida that ends up expressing itself in vaginal infections, or loves mucous membranes, the nose, the ears, the eruptions on the skin, the white tongue, and things of that nature. Now remember, your immune system rests in your gut. So you got to really say, I have to love my gut and I have to make sure that it's digesting and not compromised. And I've got to look at my tongue every day, and if it's all white and coated, then my GI system is not healthy at all. And the keto adaptive diet will do wonders for you for this. It will really help to get your blood sugar down, your weight down, and also your candida down. So slipping back into carbo addiction, we don't want that. That's why breads have casein, gluten morphine, and dairy has casein morphine. And so again, it's like, oh, I love these sugars. Now, I have a really, really healthy diet, but even me, who's got such a balanced glucose level, low sugars, when I eat this, again, it's just the same thing happens. Like, I want a little bit more. So it happens to everybody, the best of it. So just know this is what to expect, and catch yourself before the next day goes into the next day and goes into the next day, and you become an addict again, okay? And so we can see how the obesity rates have just risen. And so it's just like, I think Dr. Keneally had mentioned, if I'm not incorrect, that we're like the 47th healthiest population in the world. That's scary, okay? We have the greatest technology, intelligence, capacity, but yet we are nearly one of the sickest nations of the world. Why? Because they're feeding us a bunch of capital gaining foods that are lining other people's bank accounts, but putting really bad deposits into ours. And so we really have to pay attention in how our body is speaking to us, and how do we feel in regards to our personal weights. So back to the basics. So again, when we're thinking vegetarian, and your proteins are going to come from beans, they can also come from hemp seeds, which is one of my favorite sources of protein. 3 tablespoons is about 11 grams of protein, so it's awesome. So between that and a couple of tablespoons of sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds, you've got a perfectly balanced protein source amount so that we don't lose muscle, which is very, very important. And then again, my favorite, if we are going to use beans as a diet, sprout them by putting them in water overnight with a little bit of apple cider vinegar, dumping the water and cooking them in a pressure cooker to deactivate the enzymes that could prevent digestion and inflammation of the gut, which is very important. So again, our goal, the takeaway, is we're going to choose those foods that are more bitter to the taste rather than sweet, that are considered low carbohydrate vegetables. We want to also take into consideration that we want to use our fat for fuel. So if we're eating every 3 hours, when are we going to utilize fat for fuel? You want to understand that when you eat a meal that has protein and carbohydrates, you're under the influence of insulin for about 3 hours. During that period of time, there is no fat burning. You are delivering, you aren't picking up, okay? So when insulin comes out of your blood approximately 3 hours after you eat, what does your brain get a message that says, oh, it's time to go pick up some more passengers? But you want to say to yourself, okay, let me drink some water to get hydrated first, but again, I want you to burn fat for fuel, so I'm not going to eat any protein or carbohydrate that stimulate insulin again, and then I don't have any opportunity to burn fat. So I tell patients if they need to have a snack in between their meals, some fat snack, a handful of macadamia nuts, some avocado, celery with almond butter, something that's extremely low carbohydrate, that's not going to create an insulin flux, but just give them 100 to 130 calories of some good healthy fat to tell their brain, hey, I got some calories, stop being hungry now, we can go to the next meal. So again, the snacking all day long is absolutely terrible for your metabolism. We started having the myth that eating every 3 hours was going to help us lose weight because digestion takes the most amount of energy of any bodily function. Well, I guess if you're an athlete, that might be okay. If you don't want to lose weight, that might be okay. But if you want to burn some fat for fuel, you got to have some time to do that. And it's going to do it when insulin is not in your blood. And this is why it's so important to stop eating at least 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep at night. Because this is the time where my body's repairing itself and it's going to use the stored sugar and stored fat for fuel. But if I've eaten at nighttime fruit or a piece of bread or popcorn, it's going to stimulate insulin. And when I stimulate insulin, it stops my ability to use fat for fuel. So I say no snacking at night at all, okay? If you want to, a tablespoon of almond butter, a tablespoon of macadamia nut butter, a little handful of nuts, and that'll satiate the brain very, very quickly. I love doing a cup of tea with a little bit of coconut milk in it, coconut cream, you know, it's mostly fat or just regular organic whipping cream. We're not opposed to that because it's just a liquid butter. We do butter, we do ghee, grass-fed, and we do organic whipping cream, which is very satisfying to the brain. You can make a lot of wonderful things with this. So we want to make sure that we've got a 4 to 5 hour period between each meals, and we want to incorporate some intermittent fasting. So again, when you become very fat adapted, this is going to be really easy. I don't recommend this in the very beginning because you're still into that craving kind of modality and your body's not using fat for fuel. It takes anywhere from about 3 days to 3 weeks for you to become a real fat burner. And so you might see people in the beginning going, oh, I'm hungry, but then after about a week, they're like, I'm totally not hungry anymore. And so again, lengthen it out between 4 and 5 hours between your meals, and throw in some intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting for me is anywhere between your last meal at dinner to about 17, 18, and I like to go 20 hours until I eat again. So usually I don't eat until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That's my lunch hour, but I have my bulletproof drink, whether it's a matcha tea or a decaf coffee that I put cream in it, put in the blender with some cinnamon. It's like a cappuccino to me, and that really just gives me what I need, but keeps me in a fat burning modality. So people say, well, can I never drink alcohol? Well, you know, in reality, spirits really have no carbohydrates in it. It's the things that you put in all the really simple syrups and sugars and things of that nature. And so I tell people, you know, look, I come from a family of tequila connoisseurs. You know, we have a tequila company, the Partita Tequila Company, and we, you know, this is part of our custom and our culture, but we do it neat. Okay, and so we've also invented really good low carbohydrate margaritas using the agave 5, which is going to have 1 or 2 carbohydrates in it compared to, can you tell them maybe they're a little loud over there? Okay, we got Dr. Keneally in the background. We're going to tell her we're doing a little video here. So it's not that you can't have these foods, because in all reality, if you do it on ice, it's not going to impact you so much. But again, it may set you up for cravings. And it also, too, just a word of warning, when you do drink alcohol and you've been on a keto-adapted diet, you're going to get it affected to your brain very, very quickly. So one little shot is going to feel like 3 or 4, so be really careful. Now, wine has probably got about almost 4 carbohydrates in it, 4 carbohydrates per 4 ounces. So I tell patients, you know, if you really need to drink, have your wine, have a little bit of spirits on the rocks with a little lemon juice or what have you, but let's stay away from beer, because beer is going to be about 12 carbohydrates, and it's going to have gluten in it 99% of the time, and it's not going to be something that we want to add. So again, we do a lot of exercise that helps to stimulate our lymphatic system. I love doing the rebounder. It's a simple thing that most people can do as so well as any kind of jumping up and down. So I like doing the bicycle for that. It pumps the lymphatic system using the quads, the glutes, and the hamstring. I love to do weights training, because weights training is really important to hold on to lean muscle mass. So I give people what I call the 5-minute exercise: squats and lunges and wall squats and plank, and that alone in itself will have, you know, the ability to hold on to your lean muscle tissue during a low carbohydrate diet. And then, of course, breathing and making sure that you're expelling that carbon monoxide out, or yes, carbon dioxide, not monoxide, dioxide, because the lungs are really important for part of our cleansing aspect and for stress. So we really teach you how to breathe, regardless whether it's through meditation and or emotional cellular intelligence, how to speak to yourself, how to not have a critical voice, and really to create a healthy lifestyle that works for you for the rest of your life. Now, so just remember that you are responsible for your health. Only you can meet your own personal needs. So today you can take away a lot of information and say, okay, this sounds pretty easy. I had a patient send me a picture. He's like 7 years old. He sent me a picture of a chicken and some vegetables and a half of an avocado. And I sent him a thumbs up sign. You know, and I thought, this is really cute. You know, he says, I've never taken a picture of my food before. And I said, that's good. You did a good job. He listened. And again, it doesn't need to be difficult. And so again, you know, I'm here at the Center for New Medicine. I can do some coaching, but we also are going to be rolling out a 2-month webinar series that's going to teach you how to do this. We're going to have videos that get sent to you every single day, 5-minute intentional videos. Hi, it's Liliana popping in. You might want to put your intention on this today, and you might want to read module this about lectins or about blood sugar or about fat burning. So it really gives you a lot of one-on-one direction on what to do next with a 42-day menu plan and all the recipes, both for vegetarian and for people who are meat eaters. So really, I've done all the guesswork on this, but we're going to probably within the next 6 weeks send out an email to all our patients, and so if they want to participate in this 2-month webinar, it's going to be awesome, and once you are involved with it, you own it for the rest of your life, and we're going to do monthly live coaching on it as well, so it's going to be a lot of fun. So obviously, it's your choice. And I don't know about you guys, but my choice is to be as vital and as vibrant and as giving as I can to this world. And the first person I start with is myself, my family, my friends, and really my patients I love. I learn so much from them. And so it's really important for us to maintain a sense of community through all of this. So, as I said, our intention is you can get a book, you can read it, you can come to me, you can join the webinar. There's a lot of things that will help you in this whole mindset of having a keto lifestyle or a keto adaptive lifestyle. So we've got the blueprint and meal plans. We talked about that, and it's really set up A to Z for you, okay? So does anybody have any questions out there on Facebook Live?
Yes. Says, does the keto work well with plant-based lifestyle? Mm-hmm. I know you mentioned about vegan.
It does. You just have to be a little bit, okay, the question was, does the keto diet work good for a plant-based lifestyle? Now, the nice thing about this day and age, we have things like really good plant source proteins. I like Beyond Meat, which is a type of a look-alike meat, but it's made out of pea protein, so that's beautiful. In the course that I teach, I have a 42-day vegetarian plan as well, and I've got a lot of vegan recipes for those people who don't eat any meat or any eggs or any kind of other non-animal source things. If they eat eggs, obviously they're not a vegan. But it's a little bit more challenging, but absolutely, I have a lot of patients, especially those patients of mine that have breast cancer and that we don't have them eat a whole lot of meat or they just take it out completely. It's a little bit harder, but it's actually very workable. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you do your bulletproof coffee, you're putting in some source of fat, either coconut or... And I also see online it's suggested to do a collagen. Doesn't collagen break down where you don't get all the goodness from it in a hot liquid like coffee?
No, you could get away with it. Now, of course, if you notice that on the back of the canister of collagen, it'll say 1 scoop or so equals 12 to 18 grams of protein. Well, as soon as I put protein, I no longer am in intermittent fasting state. So if I'm trying to intermittent fast, I will just do a bulletproof drink that has 2 tablespoons of organic cream in it, and that's going to be about 100 calories. I find when I put coconut oil and cream in it, it's a little bit too much for my digestive system. If people can handle it, I say a teaspoon of coconut oil and then 2 tablespoons of cream, or you can go with David Asprey, which has a tablespoon of grass-fed butter along with the coconut oil. But, I tell people to experiment, but that really cuts your hunger. And so I'd say if you're going to use collagen, we're not really intermittent fasting, but you can totally use it as a very low-carb method of eating in the morning, absolutely. But yeah, we'll break it down. It'll be just fine, because I use collagen a lot even when I'm doing baking and stuff, and I want to get that into the protein into it. Any other questions that we had? So I think we're good with all the questions, so I want to thank you for coming today and participating, and share this with all your friends. If you have friends out there that you know would really benefit from having a lower carbohydrate diet and getting taught step by step, let them know that we are here and we have open arms and ready to teach you how to do this wonderful lifestyle. So have a good night.